January is upon us, and with it we welcome a new year, along with all the changes and technological discoveries it will bring. The year 20XX. This is the Music Arcade Mega Man Special.
Music Arcade, woo! Mega Man, woo!
Hello everyone, my name is Galen Firestone, today known as Sound Man.
Descending upon the scene, it's Ranakel, today known as Duckman.
And I'm Eddy, and I'm trying to find Dr. Wowie.
So, in honor of the new, year and all of the insanity that it's already bringing, we thought we'd talk about one of the perennial looks into the future from the NES and beyond, and that is kind of one of the most recognizable and iconic game franchises in history, and that's Mega Man, and it's, frankly, long history of rather very impressive music.
All the way back to the end of 1987.
Yeah.
And it's a franchise that both graphically, stylistically, and musically has changed a lot over the years. And I think looking at that through the lens of its soundtrack and its standout absolute bangers, of which there are many, is going to make for a fun episode.
I think so too. So we're going to go ahead and take a look, although before we begin, I need to admit to a problem. And I don't know if we're going to add this to the playlist or not, but I need to admit to a problem. When we were preparing this episode, I tried to think off the top of my head of any music from Mega Man 1. Like, literally just humming it in my own brain without having to go to YouTube and looking it up and going, oh yeah, that's a good song. Unfortunately, my brain decided it didn't want to do that and just kept defaulting to the newest song from The Weeknd, who's a modern pop star.
Weekend Man strikes again.
Weekend Man strikes again. So Blinding Lights is still, like, bouncing around in my head for no good reason, and I'm actually kind of annoyed by that, but also that's a really, really, really good pop song, so, like, yeah. I don't know. Just thought I'd bring that up, that's unfortunately my brain on Mega Man 1, is that I don't really remember the music from this, despite it being so iconic. I mean, I do, but I also don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it doesn't make sense that it's this specific song.
No, it really doesn't, other than the general 80s aesthetic of it.
And to anyone listening, this may have sound very random. We did just spend like 10 minutes joking about this fact, so we couldn't cut it off.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm still laughing here.
Honestly, while we're on personal interpretations and visions of the franchise as a whole, I'll say even that some of my most extended contact with Mega Man weren't from Mega Man itself, but from Bob and George.
Oh my god, I remember that comic.
Yeah.
That's nostalgic as hell for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, one of the original big old sprite comics that ran from 7 years. And I had a sprite comic of my own at a moment that lasted for like 17 panels or something.
Okay.
And and then there was even this forum event on a PHP forum, because how else are you going to communicate with your friends at that time, am I right?
Yeah, I know. Wow, those were the days.
In which we decided sprite comics were a bit too hard, so from now on this is going to be a comic about a square and a triangle and a round that are going to make jokes to each other. And also everyone can participate, there's no main author, everything is canon. We made 100 episodes in 4 days.
Wow.
It was insanity.
It sounds like it.
Added too much, and then somebody added too much details to it, and everything was ruined by quality. So the more things change, the more they stay the same.
You just broke our host.
Hey, we're all O's here. Come on.
I'm spitting a fact of life. That's all.
He's our producer. He can't die.
I'm not dead yet.
But yeah, shoutouts to I think it's pronounced Dave Anes or Anes, who was the author of Bob and George.
Yeah. Wow, I haven't thought about that in years, but yeah, no, that was a big part of my internet life for a while too until it ended.
Yeah.
I still spent a few months, potentially years, salty that he never finished the Cataclysm videos.
Yeah. Well, hey. Well, how about we actually finish, this episode and actually start talking about the thing we're supposed to be talking about? Since I'm going to be more or less useless at this stage because I have pop music stuck in my head, why don't someone else lead us off with Mega Man 1?
Well, Mega Man 1. The thing with Mega Man 1 is that both musically and in terms of gameplay, it's a weird pilot episode more than the foundation of a franchise.
I would agree with that.
There's elements that reverberate throughout, but it's very weird comparing to 2, which is much more foundational, in my opinion.
I would agree with that as well.
But I will say that the Cutman music does strike a chord to me. It's just... It doesn't even really evoke anything. It's just a flex of what you can do musically with an NES. And it's cheaper, it's catchy, and there'll be much more of that later, but for now it's the standout for me. Though, Eddie, you had another track in mind for Mega Man 1 as well.
Yeah, my memories of the early games are kind of limited since I started later on.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this one track that just keeps popping up, and it's the Elec track. And everyone who listens to it says it reminds them of something different. Sometimes it's Aerosmith, sometimes it's Iron Maiden. And I want to shout out a YouTube channel called Uncanny X Clan. They have this YouTube series called Oddly Familiar, where they talk about not only music but also sound effects from games that when you listen to them you go, I think I've heard that once before. And it's not meant as a knock on the composers or producers, because sometimes it's not on purpose, sometimes it's sort of stock sounds that a lot of people use. And they made a video compiling not even all of them, but most of the tracks, where they got emails from people saying, this sounds like Elec. So apparently Elecman's stage theme sounds like everything in the world. And it's a very simple series of notes that I think it's more of a case of everyone just coming up with this and thinking, I invented something, rather than people actually copying one another. But I should mention it here because otherwise people will bring it up on email, and we know Elecman is everywhere.
But yeah, other than that, the Mega Man 1 track is not as noteworthy to me as the Mega Man 2 soundtrack.
Yeah, 2 is just a much more memorable, iconic, and honestly powerful game and powerful soundtrack.
Yeah.
That one I remember with much more detail.
I haven't even played the game and I remember it.
Pretty much.
It's just some of the best NES music there is.
I'm inclined to agree with that. It's either that or it's Mario 1 with its incredibly iconic themes. That's about what you got.
Yeah. Galen, you wanted to talk about Crashman in particular, I believe.
Crashman's kind of a weird one for me because I love the song. I just hate the song how it's used in the game. Crash Band's music is not good for Crash Band's stage.
Yeah, it doesn't really say explosion.
It doesn't. You're going up against a military bomber, essentially, in a proto-Boomer Kawanger type climb, and you're playing some, like, chill kind of swing music? I don't know. I never felt that it fit the stage at all, but listening to it as a song? Love that bass line. Love how it just feels. There's a couple of really great remixes out there that just bring the horns to life. It really comes across as really cool. It gets me vibing in my chair. It's worth listening to for that. I don't really like it in the game itself, but as a song, I like listening to it quite a bit.
And to be fair, there's a lot of really great remixes applies to a lot of the track we're going to talk about.
Boy, howdy.
I mean, talk about remixes. The Crashman theme is one where I came across in the most roundabout way possible. Since I am, in fact, a child of the 90s, I did grow up with magazines with CDs with a ton of games in them. And I vividly remember one where the menu theme in the background for the CD launcher was a remix of the Crashman theme. And here's a fun fact. If I recall correctly, that remix actually uses sounds that kind of remind me of car horns. So every time I listen to Crashman's theme, I actually think of Turbo Man from Mega Man 7 rather than Crashman. So there goes another point to your argument about it not fitting Crashman at all.
Yeah.
Association, man. As in association, man. There is no association man in the Rogues Gallery of Mega Man, as far as I know.
Maybe Mega Man 12.
Call us, Capcom.
Please.
But yeah, honestly, it's hard to pick one standout track from the main levels of Mega Man 2 because they're all so good.
They really are.
But I'm still going to do this because Woodman is just one step above for me. It's just the kind of epic feeling, the whole drop you get after the build-up real soon. And it's got this really adventurous, heroic vibe that I just absolutely love.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it. Again, it's like Mega Man 2 just set the bar so high after Mega Man 1, which was good, but like, again, not like what we're talking about now. This one, calling Mega Man 1 the pilot episode and this one the first, like, real episode, yeah. Especially musically, it really matured.
Yeah, and even if you don't know this or that track is from Mega Man 2, a lot of the tracks you're just going to think, I heard that somewhere and I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
then,
did
of
pretty
course,
much just describe most people's reaction to hearing Wily 2, right?
Well,
No, that one I actually
this
like
is
really
a bit
remember as
more
Wily 2.
intense. Like, yeah, like it's just one step above still. It's
Yeah.
pretty much one of the best possible tracks on the NES period.
I would
It's either that or one from a Castlevania game.
yeah. This
Bloody
song
Tears.
Yeah, no, this song is definitely one that sticks in my mind. Like, I can picture it immediately. And just,
Yeah.
like, unlike the Weeknd's takeover of Mega Man X1, you talk about Wily's stage in Mega Man 2, I'm like, oh yeah, I can hum that immediately.
In fact, I think I brought up in somewhere around the pre-production just Wily Castle theme, and everybody knew I was talking about this one.
Yeah. Like,
Because it's just... And it's not just a good track, it's also very well used in the game. It just sets up the fact that you're in this wide open area with the castle looming in the distance, and you're just going to shoot lemons at it.
yes, indeed.
All the lemons.
And then there's a dragon.
Yep.
I hate to admit this, but I've never beaten that dragon boss. I've gotten there several times, and I've never managed to get through it.
It's okay. It's hard.
It really is.
And then we're not the only ones that like this theme, by far. And one of my favorite remixes is Omoide wa Okusanman. In particular, the version by Jam Project. So there's a bit of a track around that. So the original, well, the first animation with that a cover of this track happened on Nico Nico Doga in 2007, and was just a way to accompany an animation about a guy who remembers his time playing pretend as a kid. And it got very popular in Japan, to the point where it was it had several versions built up on that remix, including some with lyrics that were then once again elaborated upon, because there was apparently a track, an album of the best of this video showing site or something. Honestly, the exact story is a little bit obscure, and I'm just going off what I saw on the Wikipedia page from this track, because this track is good enough to have a Wikipedia page.
That says a lot about the track itself, that the song has a Wikipedia page, not the soundtrack. I mean, it does too, but the song.
Yeah. And if Jam Project vaguely reminds you of something, it may be because, aside from the many opening songs to a lot of mecha titles and video games, they've also made the opener for the opening song from One Punch Man recently.
Ah. Now, you see, for me, my primary remix of this song is Smooth McGroove's acapella cover.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good one.
Yeah. I mean, it's Smooth McGroove. Like, if you're into video game music and you don't like him, there might be something wrong with your brain.
Your words, not mine, not that I don't agree with them.
No, I'll call it out. If you don't like Smooth McGroove and you're into video game music, there's something wrong with your brain. My words. I'll take the blame for that one. Yeah, no. I mean, the fact that every version of this song is somehow good, like, it's almost so good you can't screw it up.
I believe we could find ways to spot people that manage to screw it up if we search very well, but I don't want to.
No, me neither.
This song to be
I like believing that the song is
good.
essentially perfect.
Yes.
And
moving on to Mega Man 3.
Yeah, like, what the heck are we even follow that statement up with? So let's actually change games now.
Yeah. The thing is that at this point, I feel like there's a lot of iteration in Mega Man. That's surprising, I know. But the only real standout is the one that I use for my intro, which is the Proto Man tune. Not even in the whole, just the little catchy whistle at the start.
Yeah, like, I do remember that whistle. That is...
You don't even have to see that scarf flapping in the wind or anything. You hear this whistle, you know exactly what that character is about.
Mm-hmm.
That's character definition in under 10 notes.
So, yeah, no, Proto Man is definitely one of the most iconic characters for Mega Man, and that whistle is still there. Like, it still comes up. I just find it... Like, just those 7 or so notes, it does stick in your mind, and you know exactly what's coming. I don't have the same, like, reaction to it that you do. I don't have the same reaction of, well, this is the, well, we know everything about the character. I don't get that, but I come out from the other side. It's like, oh, that whistle. I know what's about to happen. And it's been ingrained in that way just from watching gameplay, not even playing it, just like seeing it on speedruns and whatever.
Something that I really like about the whistle, and it's something that you don't really get to hear in the games proper because they cut, I think, after the 5th, 6th note, whatever. But it actually has an extended version, and the extended whistle kind of has a sort of bluesy vibe to it, to its melody, which really fits
makes sense
with the
because
character.
Yeah, blues is literally his name in Japanese.
Exactly. So they didn't just make a catchy whistle; they made one that actually fits the theme, and it's great. I love the extended version of the whistle and the many remixes that it has received.
Yeah, and that it deserves. And again, it's just something you can really build on. Now, the rest of the NES Mega Man games had a lot of good tracks, but at this point, if we cover everyone that we even mildly like, we might have a 7-hour episode, so let's not do that.
Yeah, let's skip to some, like, let's just say ones that are important to talk about.
Yeah, and nothing really stand to mind because, honestly, Mega Man, like, 5 or 6 came out in 1992 and 3, I believe. A point at which I had an SNES. I don't need to play some crummy Mega Man.
I wouldn't call them crummy, but I completely agree with that knowledge.
They were very good games, but...
Yeah, SNES definitely... Well, SNES had more than 4 audio channels to work with, so right out of the gate, composers had a lot more fun they could have with the stuff. They didn't have to worry about...
They use them.
Yeah, they didn't have to worry about ducking out one of the audio channels for sound effects. That happened a lot. While you're actually playing NES, listen to music bits cut out as you jump or whatever. It's really funny.
Yep.
And the whole "it was released in 92" thing, that's where I come in because I was born in 92. And as we've established on our first episode, I live in Brazil and we used to get consoles very, very, very late.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 2000s, I was playing Super Nintendo and my introductions to the franchise were Mega Man X and the subject matter at the moment, Mega Man 7, which, first of all, I think it has a very underrated soundtrack. It doesn't have the catchy jingles that the first few games had, which they were basically forced into making because of the limited sound channels.
Right.
Mega Man 7 could have a more complex melody. And it's notable also for being a game with a medley of previous Robot Master themes, which a lot of people like to dunk on the game for only having the one good track, which is the museum theme, which is amazing. It's a remix, a mashup and remix of the themes from Gutsman Stage from Mega Man 1, Heatman Stage from Mega Man 2, and Snake Man Stage from Mega Man 3, and you can see all 3 of them along with many other Robot Masters in the background of the museum. So that's neat, and it's a great track that really picks up the most. It's a nice callback. Yeah, it's a nice callback, and it's in the stage where Wily grabs Gutsman to turn him into a more mindless and new weapon. So the callbacks were sort of warranted. But there's another theme from Mega Man 7 that I think everyone who's played it will always remember, which is the Freezeman theme. And if you have been listening to us since episode 1, I regret not including this one on our seasonal episode because it's an amazing winter theme in my opinion. It's fun, it adds a sense of movement. There's a lot of enemies in sleds. The final boss has slides as he slides on the ice as if it was nothing. It adds a lot of fun to it. It's very, very well done and a very underrated piece of music from a game that might not have been the best Mega Man, but it had a very good soundtrack.
I think you've hit the nail on the head on one part, and that's the really moving aspect of a lot of this track. It just leads you on forward. It's very active, it's kind of busy at times, but it's just action. You're a robot that jumps and shoots. You're supposed to get a move on and start shooting. It works. It's just a set of soundtrack that tells you to have fun a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I think the Mega Man 7 soundtrack in general is very good at this whole movement thing, and things are going forward and you're jumping around. I mean, one of the bosses is called Springman, and you're jumping all around his stage. But Freezeman in particular, it brings to my mind the idea of, you know, like kids in the winter playing make-believe in the snow. And it's a very, very catchy and very fun theme. It's a good stress reliever, I would say, as well. It's very, very chill, no pun intended this time.
Fair enough.
And you've mentioned going forward, but then with Mega Man 9 and 10, they went looking back very much. Because the 7th and 8th game of the mainline series started to take advantage of the technological evolution, and then 9 and 10 went full retro, both visually and with the music, and I think they did a pretty good job at basically extending those very iterative Mega Man by adding some more to it at a time where there shouldn't have been.
I would say
amazing like that the style somehow kind of lived on even after the gap between those games.
I would say that they were really good at capturing the style, but the one thing missing is I don't find those soundtracks particularly catchy like the early ones, sadly.
Yeah, which is why I was really thinking more about like Mega Man 4 or 5 as a point of reference.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Well, the cover art for Mega Man 9 is absolutely amazing. It takes the worst US art of Mega Man 2 and basically make another one like that. It's great.
It's wonderful. It really is.
Yeah.
I know quite a few people who have a poster of that exact art just because of how, like, intentionally bad it is.
Yeah. They went, look, we know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. That was highly deliberate and highly wonderful.
Yeah. And along the way, they made a pretty decent set of games.
They did.
I had fun playing those on the PS3.
Even if 10 is my unlucky number, I actually kind of prefer 10 over 9, but yeah. They're both quite good.
And then there's 11.
Which I still have yet to play.
I've played it a little and found it frustrating. But I can appreciate, musically anyway, the fact that they're basically taking the other side of retro nostalgia, which is instead of imitating it, which is what 9 and 10 did, they wanted to build on it and make something that kind of evokes games of that era, but made with the technologies of today, and build some additional element with the double gear system gimmicks and all that, which for the slowdown part allowed them to make level design about as cool as could be. But something didn't quite click with me at that time.
And I think Mega Man 11 also brings up something that we were discussing off screen, as it were, which was also a point brought up by I believe his name is Derek Alexander, is from the YouTube channel. Here's my second YouTube channel shout out. Stop Skeletons from Fighting, where he made a series of videos talking about Mighty Number 9, the game that we often prefer to not mention if possible. And
lest we cry like an anime fan on prom night.
I'm going to be honest. There was a GDQ run of this particular game a few years ago that I thought was just really fun and entertaining. Now, admittedly, the speedrunner had to go
bad
through...
games make great runs.
Yeah, bad games make great runs sometimes. So, yeah. I don't know. I'm well aware it's not a good game, but I still have a soft spot for it entirely because of that GDQ run.
I do think that it's very interesting how it failed spectacularly hard, and yet, again, I'm not quite sure on the name, but I believe Derek says, it seems to have influenced the direction for Mega Man 11 a lot. Because the aesthetics are very similar, the soundtrack has a similar vibe. Mighty Number 9, he would change physically with the weapons he got, not just in color. And Mega Man 11 is the first time that Mega Man does that. So,
turns out the critique is way more lenient on your game when... I'm not even going to mention the fact that it's Mega Man and not Mega Man. But as it turns out, people are attached to systems such as shooting enemies until they die, which is not something Mighty Number 9 lets you do. And they didn't insult the fans during the promotional material either. So that probably helped the goodwill that game got.
Yeah, and I have another theory about that, to be honest. So I have this ongoing thought that spite can be a powerful, effective motivator when harnessed correctly. I can think Capcom looked at Mighty Number 9, went, wait a minute, this is making us look bad now, and we need to do a version of this that isn't so we can prove it can be done right, and we're the ones doing it under our actual name. And then they went and did exactly that.
I believe it. And yeah, we got a pretty decent, even if it didn't click with me, a pretty decent game overall.
Except Bounce Man. Bounce Man can just go away. I have a serious irrational hatred for Bounce Man.
Well, why don't we bounce off to another series then?
Sounds like a plan to me.
Another sub-series of Mega Man.
Mega Man X! No, seriously, that's the joke. Just that first soundtrack.
Yeah. Like... Mega Man X. From the moment you start in the game, to the moment it ends.
Yeah, that soundtrack is one of the most iconic on the Super Nintendo, which is really saying something, because the Super Nintendo was kind of a golden age of game music.
Yeah.
I did talk about how Super Metroid was the first game where I really stopped to pay attention to the soundtrack, but Mega Man X was a close second. It was, I think, the first and one of very few games to this day where I actually stopped in the title screen to see the demo and listen to the full theme that played before the logo appeared on screen, because that jingle was really catchy.
The jingle logo was catchy. The opening theme gets in your head immediately.
The opening stage just gets you immediately rocking.
It does, and then every stage is a banger, except maybe Sting Chameleon. That's a hard maybe.
Even before we get the other stages, even we get before the stage, we have suddenly Vile's theme that start to bring a lot of tension.
Yep.
And then you're losing that fight you don't know you're forced to lose because you were an 11-year-old kid or something.
Yep.
And then when you're grabbed, you hit and
then Zero shows up. Yeah, that whole
red blonde guy coming through, and you at that age, it's you have defined cool for the rest of the years of your life.
Pretty much.
As this moment.
Pretty much.
We're talking about a scene where that character became the lead for the next sub-franchise in Mega Man Zero. And that theme was so good that it was, I think, the only theme that was reused from the X series in the Zero series.
I feel like the Dr. Light theme from X1 got used somewhere in Zero, but I could be misremembering.
I know it gets used in X5. I'm not sure about the Zero series, but it's possible. It is also a very iconic theme.
It really is. It's hard to talk about individual songs in Mega Man X on account that every note of that soundtrack is basically immaculate.
Yes. Storm Eagle in particular, or if we're going by the Japanese name, Storm Eagled.
I'm gonna just stick with the English ones, because I don't got the patience for that.
You don't like your penguins?
I would just say that there's a reason our internal episode notes for Mega Man X are just Mega Man X.
Everything.
Waves arms, everything. Just look at this.
Yeah, it really is kind of perfect.
And like, even outside of the stages, you have the stage select music that starts as a let's get the part where I'm going to kick some butt, and then you clear all the stages and you just have Sigma's face in the middle, and it gets super heavy all of a sudden.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe also when you select a stage that you haven't beaten yet, I think the jingle for the Maverick is basically, what if we took the stage selects theme from the old Mega Man games and made it metal?
Pretty much. Not really as guitar heavy as metal, but it definitely is bigger and more bombastic despite being the same notes. Yep.
So since the soundtrack is pretty much perfect in itself, let's talk about some remixes that are near and dear to our heart. And my choice for this one is going to be Tekken Roll, which is a remix of the Armored Armadillo stage. And it just takes what it has to offer already and builds on it this cool ska romp that gets emotional somewhere along the midway with some lyrics on top of it that are pretty cool and thematic. More thematic with the base games than with X, I believe, but it's too working to just pass up on that. And I found it probably by accident not a long time ago, but I'm still not bored of it because it's great.
Yeah, and actually the song I'm going to talk about, the remix I'm going to talk about, is partially responsible for inspiring this entire show. So in early mid-2020, there was this thing going around where 30 days of video game music, and every day you posted a new song. And when it got to... I forget what the category was, but there was a category where I posted this exact song, and that is Towering Revolution by Washu Doll, an OC remix of, for Boomer Kawanger's stage. And, I love this song. Now that challenge actually inspired, like, I had things to say about game music, and maybe I can put something together for that. And that started the planning stages for the show.
Yeah, it's basically the challenges from which this podcast was born.
Pretty much. Now, here's the thing with Tower Revolution. It's one of those songs that actually made me look at the original and find additional value in it. When I first played through Mega Man X, I don't want to say I didn't care for Boomer Kawanger, because that's not accurate, but it didn't stick in my mind as much as some of the other, like, big ones, like Storm Eagle, Spark Mandrill, some of the, like, really famous ones.
Yeah.
But then I heard this song off of the Maverick Hunter X remix album from Overclocked Remix. And my God, does it just elevate the song to the next level. It's got that, like, Mitsuda-esque opening with the pianos, and then it just ramps up, and then it gets into this, like, really fun, like, dance track version of Boomer Kawanger's stage while still maintaining the intensity. And that made me go back to listen to the, that made me go back and actually listen to the original version of the song and go, you know what? Yeah, this is a jam. And it was always a jam, and I just sort of missed that it was a jam, and it took this other song to kind of unlock in my brain that, yes, this was in fact a jam.
Which is always nice when a remix just emphasizes some parts of the song that you weren't really focusing on necessarily.
Yeah.
I've had the same effect with Stepmania tracks of all things. Because, so it's this Dance Dance Evolution style rhythm game, except more open in nature.
Right.
So with people doing a lot of their own track. And you're supposed to follow the rhythm with the arrows. And a lot of time playing with those arrows let me pay attention to what these arrows correspond to and pay more attention to some of the underlying rhythms of some songs. Which a remix can help do as well. Also, while you were talking about OC Remix, Mega Man X albums, while researching for this episode, I just had this moment where you're looking at something that just makes perfect sense, which is the X over Zero album, which is a metal album for Mega Man X and Zero series. And it's mostly what I would qualify as hair metal, which makes so much complete and perfect sense for Zero. It's just the most obvious thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, hair metal is just one of those genres that even now I'm like, there are some hair bands that transitioned into other things that I still like, but I don't know if I can get into the style itself.
Oh yeah, no, same. I'm not saying I like it. I haven't given it enough of a listen. I'd say, I suppose I focus more on how much the theme made perfect sense to appreciate the tracks, because there's, as it turns out, there's over 130 Mega Man games. So we didn't listen to every single track from every single game for the research.
I mean, let's be honest, you focus on the pun, and that's just on brand for you.
Yes. But Zero's personality is mostly his hair.
You're not wrong.
The rest is 5% he has a sword and 5% he dies a lot.
He does die a lot.
Not even gonna try to respond for it going this way on the joke.
Since you don't necessarily have the visual, Galen is doing that expression where he's trying to say that something is wrong because something feels wrong, but then nothing wrong can be effectively pointed at.
Oh no, I could totally point it out, but we derailed the conversation into a long discussion about Zero's character and motivations, and I don't think that's within the scope of this podcast. I have a lot to say on the subject, actually, and I'm just like, I'm not bothering. You two are just two jokesters for me, and I'm not doing it.
Oh, so that was this expression. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That was me giving up an apathy going, there's no having this conversation with you guys, and it'll derail the whole podcast.
Now, full disclosure, I haven't played the X game beyond 3, so that's probably why I am very misinformed.
Whereas I played all of them, so yeah.
For better or for worse, I also played pretty much all of them except X5.
Well, let's work slowly through that and start on X2. And I would like to start by saying that you mentioned that some track earlier just made you think about speedrun, and for me it's the Mega Man X2 and X3 opening stages that just immediately set me in. I am probably watching a speedrun right now.
Can I interrupt with a bit of a hot take. Possibly the hottest take I will ever have on this show.
How can I say no to that?
Mega Man X2 is a better overall soundtrack than Mega Man X1.
Ooh, that's some strong opinions. And I felt you were having this, given that unlike Mega Man X, where we just immediately decided on talking about everything, for Mega Man X2, you just listed every single track individually.
Unfortunately, yes, I did kind of do that, but I'm like, I have to cut most of these. So I'm just going to say it. I called Mega Man X a pretty much perfect album, and it really is. There isn't really one bad note on this thing. But compositionally, it's a pretty straightforward one.
Oh, absolutely.
Mega Man X2 is also just as perfect, but then does some weirdo things. Crystal Snail's theme is like in 13/4 or something like that. It's got a real weird time signature, and it sounds great. Bubble Crab is so good, it's one of the few songs they flat out reused in a later game. It's all over the place with its instrumentation, it's all over the place with its theory. It's just, it's a better and more interesting soundtrack than one of the best soundtracks of all time. So, I'm not sure how you rate something like that.
I think one of the way I can see that happening is that essentially Mega Man X took the extremely strong melodies of the original series and said, but what if we made it rock and use the power of the Super NES?
Pretty much.
And Mega Man X2 say, wait, we can do that, that, and that? Okay, let's do everything.
Yeah, and then when they decided they're gonna do just a straightforward rockin' quote-unquote Sigma stage, or in this case, X-Hunter stage, you get...
And the Sigma/X-Hunter stage are better than the Mega Man X ones.
Yes. But, I mean, you end up with this super just heavy jam just called X-Hunters. It's so good. So yeah, I could gush about X2 all day. I'm not going to go too much into individual songs, except for the ones that I already talked about briefly, Bubble Crab, Crystal Snail, but I could go on, Flame Stag, all of them, like, on and on and on and on and on. It's literally one of my favorite overall game soundtracks of all time, X2. It's just perfect, and it's unique at the same time. It's not straightforward. It's got some crazy music theory going on there. The composers really worked to make it different, and it shows.
Yeah, and I think most of the daring in Mega Man X came from the fact that they're doing a very rocking soundtrack, which wasn't the case for Mega Man original series.
No.
It was more of a technologically inspired soundtrack.
Yeah, it was a lot
which
more...
Which makes sense, because it's a robot.
Yeah.
And now it's a robot that rocks.
Yes.
And then...
Yeah.
Came X2, where they took theirs on individual tracks instead of just the overall tone, and it works out.
It really does. Really does. Anyway, please continue. Sorry, I just needed to come out and say that and just get my opinion on that. Out in the open.
Oh, no, I was done.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. Because, yeah, I interrupted your piece to say, hey, Mega Man X2 soundtrack is amazing. And you're like, yeah, I got nothing to add. Cool. Eddie, you got anything for us?
Mega Man X3 then. So, X3 is one game that we've brought up last time already, and we've shown that Galen and I don't really see quite eye to eye on it, because it's not really a game that's stuck in my mind as far as its soundtrack goes. I came into it years later after playing a lot of X1, X2, Mega Man 7, Super Metroid, and it sort of just fell into the wayside for me. It's not bad, but they could have used better sounds, as proven by the two previous games. But we do have some neat compositions.
Yeah, I liked X3 soundtrack. It's kind of the like stepchild. It's kind of like the middle child. It's not as good as X1, 2, or 4, but it's still pretty good.
I think the thing with X3 is that, like Mega Man 3 before, it's more iterative.
Yeah. I will say, to play, it's my favorite game in the X series. But that's just to play.
Oh, yeah, no, the game's fantastic.
Yeah. But as soundtracks go, yeah, it doesn't quite hit those highs as 1 or 2, or doesn't quite hit the new hardware 4.
Like, any game where you're starting on a hoverbike crashing into a fortress can only be at least very good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so.
Isn't that X... I think that's X2. X3, I think X and 0 are destroying those giant bee things and they fall into the fortress.
No, you're right.
Shoot. Yes.
You're right. Hoverbike was 2.
Which is also a pretty good scene.
Basically, X1 is X is a wimp and 0 saves his day. X2 is X has become a huge badass and is destroying fortresses with bikes. And X3 is here's 0 again. Remember him? He's still a badass.
Pretty much. I wish there was a 0 mode in X3, gotta be honest, because that was my favorite 0 gameplay before they moved him to primarily melee in X4 and beyond. And I never felt like that. I mean, I will say it was fun and I enjoyed doing it, but it was definitely not, there was something about the sheer power of X3-0 that was just fun for me.
Sometimes it's nice to go through the levels again in Richter mode, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. Bloodless mode in Bloodstained was amazing. Okay, anyway.
Yes.
I'm so happy that exists. Moving on. We're not talking about this.
We probably will during the Castlevania episode.
I'm sure we will.
So, anything to say about any specific stage in X3?
Just very simply, I like Crushed Crawfish.
And the opening stage theme, as always, is still good even.
Has there ever been a bad opening stage theme in an X game? Like, just being honest, I don't think there has been.
And it puts me in I'm watching a speedrun mode.
Yeah, pretty much.
A bad theme? No. A forgettable theme? Maybe, because I don't remember the X7 or X8 ones.
That's fair. I mean, honestly, I feel like X8 has one good song, but that's about it.
And we will get there eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Alright, so now may as well talk about X4. So, I have a love for X4. I really do. Like, ignoring the what are we fighting for dubbing insanity, X4 is a really good game. And
that's a pretty big thing to ask, though.
I know, it really is, but everyone kind of remembers that one moment and forgets that it was actually part of a really, 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 really fun iteration in the Mega Man X series. Among my favorites, honestly.
I want to point out that I did the Dr. Wowie joke in the opening, and X4 is the game that we're talking about, the dub, not Mega Man 8.
Yep.
And that's pretty much because Mega Man 8 soundtrack is very forgettable, but X4 isn't.
Yeah, X4 is at least as good as X1 in terms of music quality. Helped by the fact that this one was on the PlayStation, and that meant it had better quality. Technically, there was a version of X3 on a 32-bit system. I forget whether it was the PlayStation or the Saturn, maybe both. But,
I think it was both.
Yeah, but that one just had basically upgraded MIDIs as opposed to actual, like, composed for the PlayStation style music. Now, we've talked, in our very first episode, we talked about the jump in hardware and what that meant for game music, especially in the form of One Winged Angel. And nothing in X4 is even remotely that dramatic. it's just good. It's just plain good. Much like Mega Man X1, it's just plain good music. Well composed, well iterated. I have a specific love for, of course, the opening theme, which is always good. Again, has there ever been a bad opening Mega Man X theme? But the one that always kind of stuck in my mind was Cyber Peacock Stage, which I always thought was just really neat. But, I mean, that one, Storm Owl.
I think one of the neat things in particular with Cyber Peacock is that the theme of the stage means that it kind of merges the rocking soundtrack of the X series with the more electronic undertones of the original series.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that actually as you said that. I'm glad you're the one who brought that up. Yeah, I think X4 gets a bad rap compared to the Super Nintendo games. I think musically especially, I think it's worth revisiting that soundtrack if you're a Mega Man X fan, because it's really good.
I think a lot of it also has to do with the gameplay where you choose from the start to be either X or Zero versus how it was done in the following games, which people tend to prefer. So it kind of ends up being ignored, which is
then add
pretty
to
unfair.
That the fact that it's a game on a system mostly aimed at 3D games,
Yeah.
and that for a 2D platformer to be noticed, it had to be at least as good as Symphony of the Night.
I would make the possibly terrifying argument that it is. Which is not to say Symphony is bad, quite the contrary. X4 is just highly underrated and an excellent Mega Man game. Because,
You know what?
yeah,
I think I'm going to play it sometime in the coming month to see how right you are.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I will say that I know people are annoyed by having to pick X or Zero at the beginning, but despite being the same stages and enemy placements, the game plays completely differently between the two characters. Like, you really get two games in one.
Reminds me of Shovel Knight.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. I would absolutely give a thumbs up to that comparison. I believe they only get one boss different between the two, and that's the big climax boss at the end of the first Sigma stage. But everything else is the same, and it's two completely different experiences, and so worth playing. And so worth listening to. This is a podcast about game music, not games themselves. But yeah, no, the soundtrack is also underrated. I think people don't get that one enough
We can't talk
credit.
about the music, we were talking about the games.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes. But yeah, no, I would honestly... Like, everyone talks about the first 3 Mega Man X games. I would say no, the first 4 Mega Man X games. All 4 of those are absolutely classics in terms of both... In terms of gameplay and music. X3 has the worst soundtrack of those 4. That one's still pretty darn good. Now I guess we can start talking about how things go downhill, ? Go on ahead. Let's talk about X5. Possibly the worst game in the series.
And that's another hot take because most people hate X6 more, but anyway.
I greatly prefer X6 over X5. X6 is X6 is punishing and half-finished, but it's still more of a playable game than X5 was, which was just... It felt ugly to play.
Well, moving on to the music.
Please.
At least X5 has some great tracks. It does rely a lot on trying to bring back the magic of old pieces. The Duff McWhalen stage, or Tidal Whale as I prefer, because I hate those Guns N' Roses puns.
Blame Claire Redfield.
Yeah, pretty much. Not wrong.
So, for those of you who don't get the joke, the girlfriend of Mega Man X5's original translator was Alison Court, who voiced Claire Redfield in the OG Resident Evil games, all the way up to remake, I think. She was a big Guns N' Roses fan, so she put the bug in his head. It's her fault. She made the puns.
And let it be known that a pun lord like myself still hates those puns. But But yeah, that stage, it reuses the theme from the Crystal Snail stage.
No, Bubble Crab.
It reuses the theme from Bubble Crab stage in X2, and I think it sounds better in X5. I love the addition of the sound effects of sonar pings, because it's underwater and you're fighting a submarine, and I like the addition of those diegetic elements into the music. It sounds really neat.
No,
And
I would definitely not disagree with that. And I think the big thing, we talked about this before, is, again, there was a big jump between Nintendo and Super Nintendo in terms of music quality, what you could do with it. There was a big jump between Super Nintendo and PlayStation and what you could do with it. So I think we're seeing that iterative hardware boost again in terms of how that music was portrayed.
yeah, and I think I might be wrong on this one, but I think the Zero theme is either reused here as well, the Zero theme from X1, or it's mixed into another track. I don't remember exactly, and I also like it better here. And then there's the very climatic X versus Zero theme,
Yeah.
and here's a bit of context that I think is needed. Keiji Inafune he meant to finish the X series with X5, and then he would pick it up back with Mega Man Zero, with Zero dead from the events of the X5 ending.
Right.
He basically got destroyed by Capcom starting X6 in secret, but that's beside the point. The thing about X5 is that, being the final game, it was meant as the climax of a lot of things that were building up, as the X series was much more story heavy than the original Mega Man series.
Yes.
It only got more story heavy with the Zero and ZX series, but at the time, X series was very, very story heavy, story centric, and every game before X5 hinted at the franchise ending with X and Zero being forced to fight one another. In X1, I think they question it a little bit, but Zero dies. Spoiler alert for a 30-year-old game. In X2, he comes back, and I think the credits have a line hinting at this thing happening in the future. X3 plays a lot into this idea that they both trust each other with their lives. And in X4, they reveal that Zero was the original host of the Maverick virus. So X5 is the climatic fight between the two that they were hinting for 4 games. And to go along with it, there's a very bombastic boss theme that only plays in the X versus Zero fight. It plays no matter who you're controlling, as you can choose to enter that stage with either X or Zero. But either way, it's the same theme, and it's an amazing track. Very, very fitting for what was supposed to be the dramatic pinnacle of the series until Capcom screwed things over.
Which is funny, because they screwed things over with a fundamentally more engaging game, then a really bad jump to attempted 3D in the X8, which was actually not bad. Like, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. I feel like, let me put it this way, you know how there was a Mega Man 9 revival, and they started doing that again?
Yep.
I would be totally okay with a Mega Man X9 revival.
Yes.
I'd be totally
So
okay
would
with
I,
it.
really.
It's even the right number.
It really is.
And it will sell entirely on SNES nostalgia, but I am SNES nostalgic.
I'm okay with that.
Give it to me.
Please.
Again, Capcom, call us.
Please. There have been some pretty good Mega Man knockoffs, but there was even a roguelike Mega Man X. I I forget what it was called, but I actually have it, and I played for a little while. I think it's like 20XX.
Oh yeah.
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 It's getting a sequel.
Really?
30XX.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that.
There's also a one-man team, from Brazil who's doing a Mega Man X fan game, which uses the SNES art style, but it lets you choose between X and Zero plays kind of like his X4 counterpart, and the game is a Metroidvania.
Yeah, I've been seeing that one make the rounds again. I know, unlike everyone else, Capcom will take a look at fan games and straight up buy them.
Yeah, that's what happened with Mega Man X Street Fighter.
Yeah. There was another one as well. There was a weird one that was like Mega Man meets Journey to the West for some inexplicable reason that I think they officially endorsed.
I missed that one.
I forget what it is. I feel like it was like not a Game Boy game, but made like emulating Game Boy hardware. And then there was Mega Man Infinite, which they haven't actually done that for, but they've absolutely let continue to exist.
Because they're not Nintendo.
They are not Nintendo. So, like, here's hoping... what is that one called? Mega Man X Corruption, I think it's called? Is the Metroidvania one?
Mega Man X Corrupted. It's been in development for a few years. It's a bit worrisome that it's not out yet after all this time, but I hope the guy manages to finish it, because
video games take really forever to make. They are hard.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, one person making a video game is no joke. So, no, it'll take as long as it takes, and if it's taking a while, hopefully that's a sign that they're really trying to dial it in and get it right, the quality, instead of rushing it out the door.
And as I told a lot of people who know me in real life, currently the Mega Man franchise is dead, but before it was dead, the Mega Man franchise pretty much had its active sub-series. Each had its own identity. The original series was a action platformer. Battle Network and its sequel were RPGs with a sort of grid battleground.
By the way, sorry to slate a little bit of strange topics in this podcast, but main battle theme from the first Battle Network, pretty good. It really gives a sense of technology that's more grounded than the base series. It gives off this whole I'm fighting on the internet kind of feel that the game has. So yeah.
And very different playstyles, and the Mega Man Legends was sort of third-person action RPG. And I've always told a lot of friends of mine that I would really love if Capcom picked up Mega Man X Corrupted and turned the X series into a Metroidvania series within the Mega Man franchise. I think it would fit perfectly well in the identity.
Or just start a new series that's more like that.
I would say Mega Man Zero had some Metroidvania elements, so it's heading in. It was already starting to head in that direction.
And State had open world element.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not necessarily Metroidvania. The progression is different, but the level layout, in particular in the first Zero game, is very much more open.
Yeah.
The first ZX as well.
And then, yeah, exactly.
I feel like they could pull that off.
That was a whole tangent after talking about X5, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to talk about a bit of music during that tangent.
Understandable, yeah. I mean, anything's better than talking about X5, so let's move on to another game.
X6. And this is a favorite of mine, at least as far as the soundtrack goes. We've just spent, I don't know how long this episode will be, but we've been recording it for about an hour and 20 minutes so far. And we've talked about a lot of games. And now, after a lot of games about a rocking soundtrack and Rockman, this is the first game in the series where they actually use a guitar in the soundtrack.
Yeah, shout out to sampling. Good job.
As a quick clarification, in Japan, Mega Man is instead named Rockman.
Yes.
Which is why another character of the main series is named Roll, because then together they are rock and roll.
And blues, and bass, and treble, and music names are abound in this series.
Shout outs again to Bob and George, where they had an elephant called Circus for circus music.
There you go.
But yeah, X6 is the first game in the franchise, and I think so far the only to really feature prominently actual real guitars. And it was the first one where they were actually used. And no theme in this game shows it better than Blaze Hitniks. And here's a thing about me. I make a lot of playlists on Spotify. There's one playlist I have called In Case of Emergency, Click the Playlist. It's for those moments where you're at work and you're either too sleepy to function and you need some heavy metal, or you are in a customer-facing job and you want to punch the customer and you need some catharsis. Blaze Hitniks made the cut into that playlist, at least for a while. It's that badass.
Yeah, that's pretty high praise, all things told, to be perfectly honest with you. And again, there's that hardware jump we were talking about, how you could actually use recorded instruments and recorded samples now, and showing that ongoing effect of what the PlayStation started to be able to do.
And X6 was the final Mega Man X, possibly the final Mega Man game period on the PlayStation. So it was really at that stage where you could push the boundaries of the hardware. So the soundtrack has a very high fidelity to its sound.
It's a shame I don't remember most of the songs on it.
Contrary to X7 or X8, where I don't remember the intro stage, I do remember the theme for the X6 intro stage, but it is a bit generic, though I don't really blame it very much, because the intro stage to X6 takes the idea that, in X5 you have a space station that's about to fall on the Earth, and the good ending has you stopping it from happening. Turns out, according to X6, the bad ending was canon, and it fell to the Earth. And the first stage of X6 has, as the background, the entire space station in a crater behind you. So
I kind of love it when they do that. They did it with XCOM 2 as well, and it just works nicely to have the bad ending be, yep, that's what happened. Now figure out how to survive that.
Yeah, Zero is dead, the space station has fallen, it's the bad ending. And to fit with that visual of the huge station in the background, they go for a more orchestral theme for the intro stage, rather than that very rocking theme that you are used to in Mega Man X games. So it becomes a bit more generic sounding, but it fits the stage well enough, so I can't complain too much. But the rest of the soundtrack is pretty good. I love Blizzard Wolfang. It's a very different idea of an ice stage theme. It's very fast paced. It kind of makes me think of sharp ice crystals, so it's really neat. And again, Blaze Hitniks is possibly one of my favorite pieces of video game music ever, so shout out to X6, which was made in just a few months, rather than a year or two, and yet it quite probably has the best soundtrack in the franchise for me.
I'm gonna have to give that soundtrack a re-listen. That's incredibly high praise, and I need to apparently give that one another shot, if it's that high.
Yeah, overall what this podcast is telling me is that I should do...
I don't think we have anything really to say about X7 other than it exists, right?
It does?
It exists. It's a game that's real, it's playable. Kind of.
I think you're lying.
Yeah, maybe.
Never heard of it.
X8's a pretty okay game, gotta be honest.
Strange that they jumped from 6 to 8, though.
Yeah, real weird about the game that actually exists and stuff existing. Anyway, yeah, X8 is okay. It's an okay video game. It was X series trending back up. But
Or exactly one title, sadly.
yeah. But, gonna be honest, the final boss theme is actually pretty darn good. I like that final boss track. I like Lumine's theme. I do. It's good. It's a good piece of music. That's a worthwhile thing about X8. It's that one track is actually quite good.
And by God, I wish it had a sequel, because the idea that Sigma was being controlled by someone else all this time was so cool.
Hey, Capcom, X9, make it happen. And it did technically have a sequel because Command Mission was a thing, but...
It didn't address anything, and Axel was up and running despite him ending X8 in a catatonic state.
Yeah, I would love to see X9.
Overall, what I'm thinking is that I need to play more Mega Man games. Well, more Mega Man X game.
I think that's worthwhile. I mean, it's worthwhile to experience them, and it's also worthwhile to say just the first 4 are the good ones, which is fairly true.
Yeah, but I want to know why.
Fair.
And that means playing the other.
Fair.
Plus, it's not like the long marathon games.
No, and Mega Man X Collection is on Steam, and it's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So
it's just a shame they divided the games into 2 packs. It's X1 through 4 as one, and X5 through 8 as another.
Which means I only need to buy the first one.
Unless you want to play X6.
I don't necessarily. Like, as I said, X6 was a step up from X5, but even then, it's like, I could live without playing it. It's not like the first 4, which are all just incredible.
The soundtrack is on Spotify, and it is the best part of the game.
Yeah, so I could absolutely just check it out there and be fine. As for Mega Man Zero, there's a couple of tracks in there I like, but we're starting to get to the point where the soundtracks start to... Like, that one was on the, GBA? Like, I think that's Game Boy Advance?
Yep. Yeah.
So we're dealing with some real hardware limitations. And stepping backwards after the PS1 and even PS2 era just feels like a mess.
I will say, though, that I'll never not like the intro bit in X2. Zero 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is just fantastic. There's the music is different and reflects the battered state Zero is in. The UI accompanies that. It's the same UI as the first Zero, but completely rusted and half destroyed until you get repaired, at which point it actually shifts to the UI of Zero 2. And yeah, really loved that bit, and the music accompanied it nicely.
Yeah.
And shoutouts.
The whole wandering in the wastes for years on end.
And shoutouts to 012, where it reused the Zero theme from X1 in a really cool way, where Zero is brought back to life and starts just curb stomping the guys in the intro stage. And that theme makes for a surprisingly amazing intro stage theme.
I mean, you're going to have a series named after a character, you gotta use the theme that introduced the character in the first place.
Pretty much.
Can't go wrong with that.
I don't have much to add about 0, 3, or 4. Do you guys?
Honestly, I don't really have a lot to add about any other game.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. I never played the ZX games. I've been tempted to get the Zero and ZX collection on Steam. I just haven't done it yet. I'm not really a platformer guy anyway.
I would say they are fine soundtracks, but the hardware limitations really screw over, because the composition style wasn't the same as in the 90s anymore.
Yeah.
Where the focus back then was in catchy jingles, and right now it isn't. So that really hurt the soundtrack.
Yeah, and then when you try to apply a more modern rhythm, to all the hardware limitations, you have things that really suffer.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, we have an email, so if you wanna send us some talking points about these games, let us know, and maybe we might make an episode on Mega Man Zero.
Yeah, if you have requests, you know where to find us.
We have the email link in the video description for YouTube or the episode description on wherever you're listening your podcast to. You're free to comment. In fact, we invite you to comment, to share your opinions privately by mail if you want. We also have a link to a playlist each episode. A playlist of some of the various tracks we're talking about during the episode. On the older episodes, as time and the MCA march on, some tracks might have been struck by the MCA or the likes, but if you... that's all the more reason to listen to the episodes as they come out.
Yep.
There, done.
And on the subject of DMCA, we couldn't add music here, so we're off to go fight Copyright Man. We'll see you next time.
You were supposed to say something.
I'm smiling too hard.